There's been a lot of intense solar activity that's occurred over the past few days, guys, as I'm sure you're aware. We've had extreme solar flares and some geomagnetic storms. We've also had some of the auroras go to the lower latitudes, which is no doubt making people think about the Carrington event that occurred in 1859. And I've talked about this before, how special alignment patterns appear to be triggering intense solar activity, especially timed very accurately to solar flares. So when we look at the Carrington event here then, just to reiterate from previous videos, this is the pattern that we get on August the 28th, and you can see the date here in the top left. This is when the activity first started, okay? We've got an alignment of Saturn, Mars, Venus and the Sun, and also separately the Earth, Mercury and the Sun, okay? So this is when the event started, the intense activity. But the actual Carrington event, which was the major solar flare which triggered the CME, were a few days later. That occurred here, and this is 11:18 Universal Time, the 2nd of September. And this is where the planets have just moved into a subtly different configuration. You still got quite an accurate alignment of Saturn, Mars and the Sun, but the Earth and Mercury have moved around the Sun a bit further here. Venus again slightly because it's nearer the Sun. As near a planet it moves faster. So you've now set up this different alignment. It's Earth, Mercury and Venus as opposed to Earth, Mercury and the Sun. And it was this event which then triggered the solar flare which gave us the CME, right? So when we're thinking about what's been going off lately, I'm thinking along the same lines that yes, we've had some intense activity started, but are there any up and coming alignments which may be a problem, which may trigger some intense activity? Well, let's just look at what has actually just happened just 2 days ago. If we look here then, we're looking at the X5.89 flare, and you can see it here in this blue box. This occurred then 11th of May, and the flare itself, when it really kicked off, was 1 hour 23 Universal Time. And if we go to the next, this is it here, you can see again that's the peak right there of the flare, right? And this is 1 hour 23 minutes Universal Time, 11th of May. So what is this a flare associated with then? Well, I've talked about conjunction patterns and also certain areas in the sky which are quite dangerous, okay? Which seem to be really linked into extreme events. If we take a top-down view of the solar system at this precise time then, this is what we're looking at. We've got an alignment of Mercury, Venus and Jupiter. If we position ourselves then at the centre of Mercury and look all the way down the line, here is what we see. The alignment takes place almost dead on targeting the Pleiades. We are positioned, as you can see the viewing location, at the centre of Mercury. So we are seeing a very accurate alignment between Jupiter, Venus and the Pleiades star group. You can see the Sun just off to the left. If we zoom in real close, we can see even more detail here. You can see that from again the centre of Mercury, the smallest angular separation between the two planets visually occurs about 2 hours and 23 minutes from the flare event, okay? And if you look to the top left, you can see the time's been adjusted. We're now at 23:03 Universal Time, May the 10th. So this alignment here in the Pleiades is only 2 hours 23 minutes from the optimum flare event. Now moving on, I just want to say something about previous alignments as well and other flares. There are certain other special considerations. If we look then at the biggest flare here from this database, top 50 solar flares, you can see where it says X40+. This is a flare that occurred 4th of November. Maximum time here is 1953 Universal Time. Now if we go further on the same database, this is the visual image of it, right? Now, I know they just did it as 40+ there, but according to this it's X24.86. And I remember some articles about it. A lot of them were saying, I think NASA was saying it was an X28. I did an analysis of this, okay, and there was something very special about it, and not just from a planetary conjunction aspect, but associated with certain moon relations. So from a previous video, let me just isolate one thing I did when I was evaluating the precise positions of the Sun and the Moon relative to the Earth when this event occurred. You can see here then I've marked it as the X28 flare, but that's the precise time in question, and again using Starry Night. At that precise time, the precise distances between the Sun and the Moon in terms of astronomical units. 1 AU is the mean distance between the Earth and the Sun, which is just under 93 million miles. But these are very accurate figures here. You can see the value here then, very close to 1 AU between the Sun and the Moon. And then we've got the distance between the Earth and the Moon. And this is the value here in terms of astronomical units. Well, the ratio between them at the precise moment the flare occurred is 375 to 1, almost dead on. This is almost perfectly 375 if you do the division sum between these two values. So I find it interesting that in some cases when we get these extreme flares, we tend to get special ratios, especially involving the Moon and the Earth and the Sun. So when I was thinking about what was coming up, in terms of future alignments, I'm thinking about, well, right now we've got some intense solar activity. Could we have any additional alignments which might be very special, certain planets moving into certain special configurations over the next couple of weeks, which may trigger additional solar flares or even possibly earthquake activity? Just like I did at the beginning of this video when I was talking about the Carrington event, you have the initial alignment and then the planets just shift position and then something else occurs far more powerful. So I've been looking at the solar system just going into the next few weeks ahead, and there is a very special alignment, or one that's very notable, which is a good contender for something maybe happening on, something quite extraordinary, on par with what we've seen or maybe even more. And the alignment in question is this one here. So you're looking at the 4th of June, 10 hours, 49 minutes, 54 seconds, right? And a basic top-down view of the solar system gives you this. So now we've got the Earth, Mercury and Jupiter aligned. Now, if we just think about that May the 11th alignment that just occurred, right? That was involving Mercury, Venus and Jupiter. So what's happened looking at this then is Venus has moved further around the Sun here, so it's no longer aligned with Mercury and Jupiter. And the Earth here was about here and it's moved down here. So that's setting up this new alignment. Now, let's have a look then from the perspective of the Earth looking down the line to Jupiter. What do we see? Once again, the alignment is in the Pleiades, but it's also very accurate. If we just zoom in a bit further, you can see more. You can see the alignment here, they're very close to one another. But you may also notice if you look to the left here, Venus and the Sun are aligned. In fact, they're very accurately aligned. And more than that, you'll also notice the Moon over here. Well, it's no accident that I've actually refined this time here to 10 hours, 49 minutes and 54 seconds on June the 4th. I've refined it to a very specific optimized event. And I'm going to show you, using that as a standard, how the other events here compare to it. So the optimized event in question involves the Moon, which is this. At this precise timestamp then, the distance between the Earth and the Sun, you can see it here in terms of astronomical units, this value here, this 1.0145 value here. If you take that value and you divide it by the Earth-Moon distance, which is this value here, okay, the ratio you get is a very harmonious 410, practically dead on, okay, optimized almost to an ideal at this precise timestamp. Now, using that as a standard then, I thought to myself, well, if we have this time here, how accurate are the other alignments just noted? Well, you can see here then, we've also got going off then this Earth, the centre of the Earth here, Earth, Mercury, Jupiter alignment. How good is that? Well, it turns out that it's 18 minutes from perfect harmony, or rather that smallest angular separation from the time of that ideal 410/1 ratio for the Moon. If you look to the top left here, the time here is 10:32 as opposed to say 10:50, right? It's about 18 minutes. That's the only difference between them in terms of one being a brilliant ratio, practically ideal 410/1, and this one here being at the optimum closeness. 18 minutes difference, which is very, very remarkable. Moving on, we then go to this one. This is where we look more closely at the Sun and Venus. And if we do that, this is what we get. Now in Starry Night, if this were like a Venus transit and Venus was crossing over the disk of the sun, Venus would have a little black blob thing right here. But you'll notice that it's not present. This is because Venus is the other side of the sun. It's like a transit level conjunction. It's just that the sun's in between. It's the disk of the sun which blocks out Venus. So this is very accurate as well. How accurate from Venus being central? Well, about 4 hours 40 minutes. Okay, you can see here we've got the timestamp 15:30 in the top left, June the 4th, right? So that's that going off. So when you think about it then, on this particular timestamp here, we do have 3 things going off very close to one another, and they're very close at optimum to one another. So this sets up a very intriguing pattern, and it was very notable, guys. I noticed it like you do, and I thought, well, if we still have some intense solar activity going off, next couple of weeks, will this pattern here, when the planets make their move, when they move around the sun, when these things are optimized, could this also trigger another extreme solar flare event, like an X-class flare event, or maybe even an earthquake? And the reason I throw in earthquake was because a year or two ago, I was on the brink of doing a video analysis of another interesting alignment I spotted, and I thought it might be an earthquake, and the alignment in question involved, or one of the elements going off, was an alignment of the Earth, the Sun and Venus, transit type level, but with the sun in the middle, exactly like this one I'm seeing here. So I'm just kind of wondering, with these 3 events being so accurate and very close to one another, whether we could see something special occur on this date as well. It is, of course, highly speculative, guys. As with all things, probably nothing happens, but when I do see interesting alignments, I do like to make note of them and I'll bring them to your attention. So this is definitely one to watch, and we're only a few, weeks away, so we'll know one way or the other if it's a significant event or not. If there is a solar flare, then if it is strongly tied into that ratio involving the moon and the sun, it may well occur with high precision, very close to this, timestamp here on the 4th of June, 10:49:54, or it's about 10:50. So if it's an earthquake, it might not be so accurately tied, but still, it's an interesting one to consider, and I hope this video has been of interest. As always, if you like my work, subscribe, hit that bell notification. My website link's in the description box, and don't be afraid to go there and buy my books. Anyway, we'll leave it there, guys. Over and out.